everyone. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to implement a REST API with Django REST Framework. I wrote a Medium blog post a couple of weeks ago on the same subject. So I'm just going to follow through that blog post and explain to you what I have written there so that for anyone who wants to follow along can watch this video and create a REST API using the Django REST framework. I have written another blog post and have done another video on creating a GraphQL API with Python, with Graphene and Django again. But we also need to understand REST APIs are still very much prevalent, and many organizations still use REST APIs. So knowing how to create a REST API with whatever the framework is still useful. So because I wrote and created a video on creating a GraphQL API with Python, Graphene, and Django, so I thought of making a video on implementing a REST API with Django REST framework as well. So I also recommend you to read through this blog post on Medium. So I'll put the link to this blog post in the comment section below. Okay, so let's go on. So to create a REST API using Django, we need to obviously have Python and the Django REST framework installed in your system. So I'm not going to show you how to install Python. It's pretty much a standard. If you're using a Linux platform, you should already have Python installed, most probably. And again, it should be the same with macOS. If not, I would recommend you just visit the python.org website and follow along the instructions to install Python. And also Python has a package manager called pip, a very useful package manager to install additional packages, which I'll be using to install Django REST framework, which is another package that comes in addition to Django, which again I'll be using the pip package manager to install as well. So let's get started. So you can choose wherever you want to work. So I just created a location called Django REST. I'm just going to follow whatever instruction that I have written in this blog post so that it makes it easier for anyone who would like to follow. So I'm going to create a new directory called Django REST API, obviously, because we're creating a REST API. And I'm going to change directory into that. Okay, so obviously I can just see if Python is installed in my platform. I have Python 3.9 in my macOS platform. And then when it comes to working on a Python project, it's always useful to create a virtual environment for that project, so that you start with a clean slate of Python, and then you do additional package installation within that virtual environment so that you don't clutter the global Python environment. So there are a couple of ways to install or create a virtual environment. So I think from Python version 3.4 and later Python itself shipped a virtual environment package called venv, a module called venv, so you can use that, or there is another third-party tool called virtual env as well. So because Python already has a module, I'm going to use that. So to create that, you can use Python, then module venv. Maybe you can give it another name like venv, or you can just say create it in the current location by saying dot. So I'm just gonna say in the same location because my blog post says so. So when you do that thing, it's gonna take some time, and then create a particular folder structure. So there is a bin directory inside which you will find Python, pip, and few other scripts as well. And there is an include directory which probably should have some other directories. If you have Python include files, those should be there. If not, don't worry. So lib directory should have the Python 3.9. So anyhow, so what we need to worry about is at this stage this particular folder structure. And next thing is to activate this particular virtual environment. So in a Unix Linux based environments, you can source the bin directory under which you have this activate script files. Based on your shell, you can choose whatever the scripts that you need to run. So this activate script will be by default applicable for your particular shell. In my case, it's the bash shell, as you can see here. If you're using any other shell, you have to run the relevant script files for those particular shells. So I'm going to use that. So when you do that thing, you can see the prompt changes, so which is an indication that your virtual environment got activated correctly. Okay, so once that is done, our next step should be to install the relevant packages that's needed for our project. So because we are going to implement a REST API using Django REST Framework, I need to install both Django as well as the Django REST Framework packages. So let's first install Django. So if I just do this, it's gonna download the latest version of Django. Otherwise, you can also give versions like this, maybe something like 3.x. But I'm gonna stick to the latest version because that's what I have used in the blog post. So if you do that, it's gonna download the latest version of Django as of the time that you are running this. So as you can see, Django 4.02 is being downloaded here. Of course, you get some other additional messages if you to upgrade your pip. You can do that if you want to, but I'm just going to stick to how it is at the moment. So next thing is I'm going to install Django REST framework on top of this, because I need that, because we're going to implement a REST API. So once that is done, as you can see, Django REST framework is also installed, and you can see the successful installation message of the version 3.13 in this case. So once this is done, the next step should be to create a Django project. So once the Django project is created, we can then go about creating our API. So Django admin start project. When you have Django already installed, you should have this Django admin script. So this is how you start a project in Django. Product API. So you can give your project name, whatever it suits your project, but in my case it's product API. When you do that, you will also get, in addition to the previous folders that got created by the virtual environment, I will have this product API. So I'm going to cd into that, and in which you will see a folder called product API and a file named manage.py. So if you just go into this folder, you will see a bunch of files available. There's a settings.py, there's a urls.py, there's a wsgi, which is for wsgi.py, and there is an asgi.py file, and there is also an init.py file. And so these are like mere Python files that are necessary for certain operations within Django. So don't worry if you don't know much about it. So next thing, what I'm going to do here is open up this particular location in my Visual Studio Code editor, so that I can work on this from here. Right. So if you open up this, the next thing I want to do is show you the settings file. And so in this settings, we need to add both the REST framework and my product config, which you will see it in the application. Before we do that thing, we also need to create a new app named product app, and I'll tell you why we need that in a bit while later. So once we create this, we should have two folders, product and the product API. And if you go back here, if you go into product, you see a folder called migrations, and there is also a file named apps. So this apps folder or file has this product config, which is what you see here under the product apps, which is the file, and then product config class needs to be specified as installed applications within our Django project. So we need to have these two specified in addition to existing applications that by default comes within Django. So let's go open this, and you see a bunch of configurations here. So let me just expand this for you, and install apps. Just specify these two sections as well. Okay, and then going about then creating the model is important. So when it comes to Django, you have to specifically if you are making a database backed application, usually that will be the case for any web application. There will be a database behind the scenes, so you need to have a model. Django comes with a object relational model where you can specify how your table structure should look like. That's your model. So basically creating a model in the sense we can specify what table I should have and what are the columns and its specification that we need to talk about. So Django's advantage is that, and it makes things quite easier with this. Now you understand why we need this particular application, because in the default application we don't have this model. So we have to create an application to create any models within that application. So open up the models.py file. As you can see at the moment it is empty, so we can create that. And also I should tell Django by default comes with SQLite database. So if you specify here databases, it says it will create a database named db.sqlite3. If you want to make that a meaningful name, you can change this name also, but I'm just going to leave it as is. So SQLite3 is by default will be used by Django, but Django also supports other databases like Oracle, MySQL, as well as PostgreSQL and so forth. But I'll leave that kind of advanced thing for you to experiment and figure it out. But as this is an introductory session on creating a REST API using Django, I'll stick to SQLite 3. So let's then create our model. So I'm just going to copy paste this and explain to you what's happening there. So in the models.py, and as you can see, it has a class name product inherited from the models.model class from Django. So that comes from Django.db module. And inside that we have number of attributes. We have a name attribute, which is a car field with max length of 30. There's a product category, which has further attributes like it can be true, blank, it can be a blank entry if needed, and created date is date time field. Available items is an integer field and can be blank and null as well. And the ordering attribute in an inner class is specified as name, so which is to indicate that when we ask for many products, and those products will be returned in the descending order of the name. So that's what Django is going to do. So coming back to the blog post, and then I am talking about the SQLite database here. And then now we need to, now what we have done here is basically we have created the model, but we want to create a REST API end of the day. So REST API functionality comes from the Django REST Framework, as I mentioned previously. So Django REST Framework, we installed it, right? So in the Django REST Framework, there is this concept called serializers. Serializers are a mechanism on how we want to convert these model properties into a human readable form when you present it to an API response. So we need to have a serializers.py file inside our product uh, application. So let me create that file. It's not available by default, but you can create it. See, the, new file, serializers.py. Okay, and then in the serializers.py file, we have to specify how each of the properties that we mentioned in the model is gonna showcase in our serializer and in which format. So for that, we need to have this particular file. So I'm going to copy paste this and then explain to you what that means. So we just open it up and copy paste that. So of course, serializers class is imported from the REST framework, and from the product models we imported the product uh, class, and then in the product serializer class, which is inherited from the serializers.serializer, we have all those four fields that we mentioned and kind of duplicated that again here to just to indicate that we want to serialize all those four fields. And you can also see there is something called PK attribute also here. So that is basically an indication of primary key, which is a kind of a nuance in the Django, because when you create a model here and when you insert a new product, Django will automatically create a new column also named ID, which will be the kind of primary key for each of those tables by default. You can also change that thing, that behavior, and have other fields as primary keys, but Django will always add this ID field for you. So that's what we have mentioned as we want to return it as PK when it comes to our API. So then in the same serializer, we have two methods called the create method and the update method. Create method, of course, has this validated data attribute. So we'll come to that. So that validated data is used to create objects in the product objects model. So when this particular statement is executed, Django will automatically create an entry in our database. So we can see that thing later. Of course, when it comes to update, you need to provide an instance, already available instance will be passed in along with whatever the validated data that we need to update, right? And in that case, we will be getting all the validated data for each and every attribute that we are going to use and update in our existing instance, because we are updating an existing instance, and then we save it and return the instance as well. Okay, so that's basically the serializer. So that is needed, and that's how REST framework works. And then Django is again a model view controller. Uh, it follows the MVC architecture, model view controller. So we have this model, we need to have a view and a controller as well. But the right way of specifying Django's architecture is saying MTV architecture, model template view architecture. So model is the model that we just created. Templates will be the HTML files and whatever the other presentation files that you will be creating in Django applications. And the view is basically how you connect those template visualizations and the model in between. So that's how the best way of explaining the Django's architecture pattern. But model view controller pattern is again the same, but those V and T's and C's will be a little different in terminology. So don't confuse yourself in that aspect. So we are going to implement a view, basically the controller side of things, how you are going to uh, uh, accept the request and then do processing and then maybe take details out of product or your model and update and present it. So basically I'm gonna create this views.py file which is already there here, and as you can see it's empty. So I'm gonna copy paste this, and it's a bit of a longer file, but don't get frowned upon that. And just gonna copy paste and save it. So there are a couple of classes and functions, as you can see in this particular file. So there is a function called product list, which has this annotation as CSRF exempt. So it's just a Django way of saying that any cross-site request forgery is exempted in this particular request if it may happen. So product list, as you can see, is a way of getting and posting requests. Like you can understand that as this: upon which set of objects these methods will be applied on. Now, if you look at getting all the available products, you will be a kind of, your scope will be the entire set of products available. And when it comes to creating a new product also, you are adding that product to an existing set of collections. So the scope of this product list will be a collection of products. So that's why we have implemented get and post in this particular method. So when it comes to product detail, as you can see, we pass a primary key, and the scope will be always a one set of, or one particular product or one particular object. You will be maybe getting or maybe asking for one particular product. You may be updating an existing product, just one product, or you will be deleting one single product. Okay, so now when it comes to taking all the products, we of course will take the models, and we object all will return that. And then we have this product serializer which we created earlier on, and we pass in the products and return it back. And then we use this JSON response class, a special class that I have implemented, and then I pass this serializer in. So in this particular JSON response class, I pass the data for the product serializer, and that data uses this JSON renderer which is coming from the REST framework renderers, and render that data as content. And then I also set in the KW args the content type as application JSON, because I want to make the return type as application JSON. If it's something else, you can set that as well. And yeah, so I return it. So when this particular function hits, what happens is gonna get all the products. It uses the serializer to determine what are the attributes that needs to be incorporated into this particular response, and then use these JSON response to render that in the particular format. That's exactly is what happening here. And in the post, basically what happens is, again we are using the JSON parser here, so which is again coming from the REST framework parsers, because we know our input is going to come as a JSON format, and we are going to use that and pass the product data. And then again we are using the product serializer to serialize that and making sure it is valid, and we use the product serializer save. So when this happens, basically what gets executed is this particular function is what it's get executed. Perfect. So when the product serializer is being used, and then we return the JSON response again with a particular status code saying 201. If the data is not valid for whatever reason, because we specified certain data types for our input fields, and if that didn't match, of course this is valid method is going to fail, and it's going to return false, and then we need to send back the 400 bad request as stated here. And if you look at the product detail, it's very much self-explanatory now, and if you pass in the right primary key, we can get that particular product that we want to deal with now. If that doesn't exist, we are gonna throw a 404, which is again not found, and error, HTTP error code. And then if the method is get, we're going to use the product serializer again and then return back the JSON response. In the put method, we are going to update it. Again, the same process, and we save that particular data. And if it's delete, we just call the product delete and send back this 204 no content. So this particular file is now very much understandable. So let's go down, and I have done the explanations. Now we have to specify how a client can connect with these particular methods. So the way that we do that is using the urls.py file, which you can find in our main product. So main function, main project folder. So it already has this admin thing, so that is for Django admin uh, uh, application. I'm not going to touch upon that today, but I'll just leave it as is. If you want to just keep it that way, and I'm going to use this particular functionality, and as you can see here, I'm using RE path, which is for regular expression path. So I'm just gonna import that as well here. And I need to import the views as well from the products thing. So I'm just gonna bring that in. And so the way that the Django 4.0 deals with in this functionality is a little bit different from the earlier versions. Earlier versions used to be URLs instead of path or regular expression path. But again, those quirks I will let you figure it out. But anyhow, so for this particular URL says if your API call comes at products context, hit the product list, and based on the method, we determine what functionality that we are going to use and return and call upon. So this particular thing says products, and then I use this particular um, uh, primary key to indicate basically it needs to be a number, because primary key is always a number, it's an integer, and in that case we are just calling the product details. So all done up to this point. So, and of course, yeah, so we need to have well, so I can do this thing, but in fact it's quite good if I had created these urls.py here, so that I just kind of consolidate all the urls.py. So after looking at this, I just can recall it. So I'm just going to copy this here and create a new file here. And so I think when you created it new, it just messed it up. And you can do it here again, there's no issue doing that. But when you have like multiple applications, it's always good to localize your URLs to that particular application, and then basically in that way you will easily figure out what are the URLs that particular application is serving, and so forth. So here in this case, what I'm going to do is use this include section. So basically I can use that and then delete these two and use path to include our product.urls, so which is gonna use the product.urls file here, and just kind of place all the URL patterns that's available in that file here. So if you had just put the same here, even that would have worked. But as I said, it's always good, a recommended practice to separate out your URLs in this way. So now all done. So now we just have to sort of work on and start our server and serve new files, new APIs and test. So let me just go here, and so Python Django comes with a test server, which is quite easy for you to test it. So you can just use python manage.py run server, and yeah, so this says the port is already being used, and that's because it's being used, of course. So I can change the port, possibly. I think the way to do that is let's say 5001. Yeah, so I just made a mistake there. So it's like your local host. So this basically says accept request from wherever you are, and then you just give the port number as well. So 5001. So you can basically change it in the relevant places. So let's see. So first let's create a set of products. So I'm gonna use curl command. Obviously that's not available. Yeah, so it just happened to be clicked that particular file. So I'm just gonna use a new thing here and just paste it. And of course I need to change this to 5001. Okay, so as you can see, curl is calling the post content type application JSON. It's passing a data with name, product category, created date, and available items. And I'm calling the slash products. So here in this case, you can remember slash products is going to hit the product list post method. So when I do this, I'm getting an error. So let's see why is that. Right. We are getting we're getting an error, and let's go back to our server, and it says no such table product underscore product. So this was quite a silly mistake, and we just created the. I'm just going to stop the server, and we created this particular model, but we never asked Django to create those tables in our SQLite. So the way that you do that is, so you say manage.py, you can say migrate, and when you do that thing, it's gonna create all those tables in the SQLite table as well. So let's go and see that SQLite 3, and then I can ask for DB SQLite. So SQLite 3 is a command line application that's available in Unix platforms. If not, I recommend you install that as well, and you can have a look at the schema for that in your section as well. But if I look at this, I still don't find my products table. So let's fix that as well. So let's start using this make migrations, and as you can see, it creates the model for our product. And now I need to bring this back. Now when you do the python manage.py migrate, what it's going to bring is just the default set of functionalities that's needed, specifically user related functionalities and so forth. So those things will be there, and if you want to use Django's user authentication backend and functionality, you can use those tables as well. So then I can use migrate again to bring that table as well. So if I just go back to this and use my schema, I should now see the product underscore product. because it's going to name it based on your application and your class name in lowercase, and you can see all the properties that you have in that. So now going back and starting my server, and then I'm gonna call this. As you can see, this time you got 201 created with your product values returned back as a JSON as well. So that's basically your API with create function. Now we can get all the products with our curl get command. So let me clear the screen for you, and then you can use this. Again, yeah, so that's because my port was wrong. I happen to be using the wrong port again and again. So using 5001, you get the correct response back as well. Okay, so let's also create another product. Let's say available items, I would say just 55, and I'll just change a few property values here. Product is I'll just put it as something like that. So we should have two values here, pk1 and pk2, and then we go about we can update one particular thing as well. So here in this case, I'm gonna update the first one, and so leaving there, so pasting it here, and don't forget to change the correct port, and I'm gonna make the available items, as you can see, to 52. I think the remaining values are the same. As you can see, it got returned as well. Let's now get all the products and see if it's updated. As you guessed, it's updated as well. And then you can probably maybe get one particular product. This is our scope being one particular thing. So yes, so you can get it back, and maybe you can also try the other way around. And I should warn you about this, forgetting about this last slash. If you just miss that thing, it's gonna complain saying 301 moved permanently, because Django is a bit strict on how you specify those URLs as well, for good reasons, of course. So just remember that. So I'm going to delete one of these. I don't have number 3 available, so I can delete number 2. So again, changing the right port is important. So you get 204 no content. So if I just go back and ask for all the products, you should only get one now. And as you guess, so yeah, so that's all. So going back to our code, you saw these models.py, which had these properties, and again you saw the serializers having all these properties specified. You would have guessed why we have to kind of duplicate all these things in multiple places. In fact, that goes against the Django as well as Python principles on don't repeat yourself. So but Django has ways to eliminate those boilerplate codes. So that's exactly what I have explained here. In your serializer, we have something called model serializers. So basically remove the above serializer and replace it with this. So this entire code replacing with this particular content. So I'm gonna just copy paste this so that if I want it back, you can use it. Gonna make this a backup. You can leave it as that, and then use this, just change it to this. So this does nothing special, in fact. So the product serializer is now is inherited from serializer dot model serializer instead of serializers dot serializer. So that is a way of saying, okay, take everything in the model and just uh, you know try to get those fields available here, and you specify the model in a meta inner class and then say the fields that you need in this. So as you can see, I have specified the fields here, and when you do this change, um, yeah, so let's do that now. So let's go back here, and I'm gonna restart the server just in case, and then I'm gonna ask for all the products. And earlier it returned with the PK attribute, now it's returning with the ID attribute, which is an indication that this is working fine as well. So that's all I have for you to explain. So there is a little a bit more that I go about explaining in this blog post. I will recommend that you read that through as well, because I have showcased the fundamentals in this video. I'm gonna call it a day, and I'll see you in another video blog very soon. Take care. So I hope you enjoyed the video.